The laundromat smelled faintly of detergent and damp socks, the kind of place where time seemed to stall. At the far end, beneath a buzzing fluorescent light, a young woman knelt by a shallow utility sink, her hands raw and reddened from scrubbing a tiny t-shirt that couldn't have fit a child older than 3. Her long chestnut hair, tangled and damp at the edges, fell forward as she rinsed the soap away, biting her lip as if holding back tears. Behind her, a toddler with oversized sneakers sat quietly on the cracked tile floor, tracing invisible shapes with his finger. He didn't cry, though his little stomach growled audibly. That silence made her look even more fragile. Neither of them noticed the man leaning casually against the far wall, a tall figure in a tailored charcoal coat and polished leather shoes, watching her with the kind of quiet, calculated attention that made strangers uneasy. He looked nothing like anyone who belonged here. Ethan Crowley wasn't supposed to be here. He was the newly appointed CEO of Halstead Retail Group, a multi-billion-dollar empire, and his board had insisted he get out of his glass tower to understand consumer habits. He'd gone undercover in worn jeans and a thrifted hoodie, wandering through laundromats, discount stores, and small town streets, taking notes for his upcoming expansion plan. But the moment he saw her, this exhausted young mother crouched by a sink, it was no longer about business. The faucet sputtered as Mia twisted it off, carefully wringing out the damp shirt before laying it across a rusted drying rack. She glanced at her son, then reached into the shallow pocket of her worn-out jeans, pulling out a handful of coins, mostly nickels and a few tarnished quarters. She counted them twice, whispering under her breath, and then closed her fist tightly, like she could keep the world from taking them away. The child, who couldn't have been more than 4, tugged softly at her sleeve. "Mommy, are we getting burgers today?" His little voice was hopeful, fragile. Mia froze, her shoulders tense. Then she brushed his soft curls back and forced a small smile. "Not today, baby. Mommy's making noodles tonight, the good kind." She tried to make it sound exciting, but Ethan caught the way her throat tightened when she said it. He kept watching as she reached for another tiny shirt from a duct-taped backpack beside her. The zipper was half broken, one strap fraying, the faded dinosaur print barely visible anymore. Her sneakers had worn through at the toes, and the cuff of her faded gray hoodie was stained. But she carried herself with a strange, quiet grace that drew his attention. Even in this cramped, damp place, she looked striking, her sharp cheekbones catching the harsh fluorescent light, her hands steady despite the obvious exhaustion. Ethan considered walking away, but then the laundromat door creaked open, letting in a gust of cold air and a man with a beer-stained jacket. He looked irritated, muttering something under his breath as he shoved a basket onto the counter. Mia instinctively pulled her son closer, her hand resting protectively on his tiny shoulder. Ethan noticed the way her jaw clenched, and for some reason, he found himself moving closer. "Need a hand?" he asked softly, his voice low enough not to startle her. She looked up, blinking, clearly startled anyway. "I'm fine," she said quickly, pushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. Her tone wasn't sharp, just weary, like she'd learned long ago not to expect kindness. Ethan didn't push. He simply nodded, pretending to adjust the sleeve of his hoodie, though his eyes lingered. Minutes passed. The laundromat's hum was interrupted only by the rumble of machines and the occasional impatient sigh from the man by the counter. When Mia finished scrubbing, she bundled the wet clothes into the duct-taped backpack and stood, balancing the bag awkwardly on her shoulder while scooping her son into her arms. The boy wrapped his legs around her waist like he'd done it 1,000 times, resting his tired head against her collarbone. Ethan thought she was leaving, but instead, she walked toward the vending machine by the door. She hesitated for a long moment, then slowly slipped 2 quarters into the slot, pressing the button for a packet of crackers. When it clunked down, she gave them to her son without taking a bite herself. That small act, the sacrifice so quiet, so automatic, made something in Ethan's chest tighten. He followed her out into the cold night, keeping a respectful distance. She walked quickly, her shoulders hunched against the wind, weaving through cracked sidewalks toward a dimly lit apartment complex. From where he stood, he could see a single bulb flickering on the second floor, and an eviction notice curling slightly on one of the doors. Mia stopped there. Her son squirmed in her arms, half-asleep now, and she fished a key from her pocket. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow hallway lined with peeling paint. Inside, through the gap, Ethan caught a glimpse of an empty fridge, humming faintly, and a single mattress on the floor. He turned away, unsettled. He wasn't supposed to interfere, but as he walked back toward his car, headlights washing over the cracked pavement, a thought gnawed at him. She didn't need charity. She needed a chance. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, Ethan Crowley knew he wasn't done with Mia Williams. The next morning, Ethan sat in the back of a sleek black SUV parked across from the laundromat. His phone buzzed with emails about quarterly reports, expansion pitches, and investor demands, but he ignored them. His mind kept circling back to me, the quiet strength in her posture, the way she held her son close as if shielding him from the world, and the quiet pride that kept her from asking for help. When Mia finally appeared, the sun was just breaking through a thin layer of clouds. Her damp hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, her hoodie zipped up halfway, and that same duct-taped backpack slung over her shoulder. Her son trailed beside her, yawning and rubbing his eyes, clutching a folded bus transfer ticket in his tiny hand. Ethan noticed how she hesitated at the crosswalk, checking her pocket for change before boarding the bus. He followed discreetly in his SUV, trying not to question why he cared so much. Inside the bus, Mia pressed her forehead lightly against the cold glass, her son leaning against her. He overheard fragments of conversations, people talking about school lunches, overdue bills, and second jobs, and he realized she wasn't an exception here. She was one of countless others balancing on the edge. At Halstead headquarters later that day, Ethan's assistant, Olivia, burst into his office, dressed in a fitted deep red blazer and black heels, a sharp contrast to Mia's worn hoodie and fraying sneakers. "The board's waiting," she reminded him. Ethan glanced at the towering skyline outside his window, his reflection faintly overlapping the glass. "I need 10 minutes," he said, loosening his tie and grabbing his phone. Without thinking twice, he searched for local hiring programs and charity partnerships. But something in his gut told him it couldn't just be about handing out donations. He needed to see Mia again. 2 evenings later, he returned to the laundromat. It was quieter than before, the machines humming softly under the pale ceiling lights. He spotted Mia at the same sink, carefully folding clothes this time, her son perched on a plastic chair, swinging his legs. "Hey," Ethan said gently, stepping closer. She stiffened for a moment before glancing up. Her hazel eyes studied him carefully, lingering on his clean sneakers and pressed hoodie. "You again," she said cautiously, tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear. He gave a small, easy smile. "Yeah, me again. Listen, I know this is out of nowhere, but my company has some job openings, office roles, warehouse roles, even remote admin work. Good pay, benefits. I thought you might want to apply." Her brows drew together, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you're capable," he replied simply, "and because no one should have to wash clothes in a sink unless they want to." Mia's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. She looked down at her son, who was now munching on a single granola bar from his pocket, then back at Ethan. I don't have a degree," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in her jaw. "Doesn't matter," he said. "We train people. All I need is someone willing to work hard." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of dryers and the clinking of a loose zipper pull on her backpack. Then she finally asked, almost in a whisper, "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said. "Just a chance." For the first time, Her guarded expression cracked slightly. Her eyes softened, but she didn't commit. Instead, she nodded once, hesitantly taking the business card he slid across the folding table. That night, Mia sat on the edge of the single mattress in her apartment, turning the card over and over in her hands while her son slept curled up beside her. She thought about the cracked bus windows, the empty fridge, the constant ache in her chest from pretending everything was fine. And then she thought about the stranger who somehow believed she could be more. 2 weeks later, she walked into Halstead's downtown office tower, wearing a borrowed blazer from the thrift store, her worn sneakers scrubbed clean. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the receptionist, but her chin lifted with quiet resolve. Ethan watched from a distance as Olivia led her toward the interview room. He hadn't told the hiring managers who she was or asked for favors. He wanted her to earn it, and she did. By the end of the week, Mia Williams became a junior logistics coordinator, starting at $24 an hour with health benefits for her and her son. The first paycheck came a month later. Mia stood in the small grocery store down the street, staring at the overflowing cart she never thought she'd afford. For the first time in years, she didn't have to count coins or put things back. Her son tugged on her sleeve, holding up a pack of burgers with wide eyes. She laughed softly, brushing his curls back. "Yeah, baby," she said, her throat tightening with emotion. "This time we're getting burgers." Outside, Ethan waited by his car, leaning casually against the doorframe. She spotted him and walked over, clutching the paper bag filled with groceries. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Ethan shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just pay it forward when you can." She held his gaze for a long moment, the city lights reflecting in her hazel eyes. Then she smiled, genuine, soft, and steady. One act of generosity hadn't just changed her life. It had rerouted it completely, and somewhere deep down, Ethan realized it had changed him too.